You think history is shaped by geniuses, right? Great minds, brilliant decisions, world-changing ideas. Sounds reasonable, but not always true. Sometimes history moves forward because of people you would not even trust to watch your sandwich for 5 minutes. For example, one bank robber genuinely believed that lemon juice could make him invisible. Another guy thought tying balloons to a plastic chair was a solid plan to fly. And one president literally died just trying to prove he was not weak. And the worst part? All of it is real. Not fiction, not myths, just humans, being way too confident in very bad ideas. Story 1. The invisible bank robber with lemon juice. He did not wear a mask, did not cover his face, did not rush, because in his mind everything was perfect. He believed he was invisible. This genius idea came from a piece of knowledge that sounded almost logical. Lemon juice can be used as invisible ink, and in his very creative logic, if he rubbed lemon juice on his face, cameras would not be able to see him. Science probably heard that and took the day off. So he confidently walked into a bank in broad daylight, looking straight at the camera like he was filming his own show. No need to hide, no need to hurry, because clearly, he thought no one could see him. A few hours later, the police just had to turn on the TV. There he was, clear, HD, no filters needed. When he got arrested, he was genuinely shocked. But I put lemon juice on my face. Turns out confidence cannot replace basic knowledge. And if you think that is peak stupidity, just wait. Story 2. The man who flew on a plastic chair. One man just wanted to enjoy the view. But instead of taking a plane, climbing a mountain, or booking a tour, he chose an option nobody else would think of. He bought dozens of weather balloons and tied them to a plastic lawn chair. He packed some snacks, a few beers, and a pellet gun to shoot balloons when he wanted to come down. The plan sounded fine, if you ignore all basic logic. At first, he only intended to float a few hundred meters, but the moment the rope was cut, he shot straight into the sky like a cartoon character, reaching nearly 16,000 feet, right in commercial air traffic. Pilots saw him and definitely had to double-check their vision. Eventually, he made it back down, leaving behind a story the FAA was absolutely not prepared for. But at least, he did not call the police on himself. Story 3. The drunk man who called the cops on himself. Have you ever called the police on yourself? Sounds impossible, but one man did it very seriously. During a night of drinking a little too much, he called 911 to report a dangerous driver. He described everything in detail, swerving, changing lanes erratically, almost causing accidents. He sounded like a perfect citizen trying to protect the public. There was just one small problem. The car he was describing was the one he was driving. Police quickly tracked the call, pulled the vehicle over, and found that the dangerous driver was the caller himself. A plot twist powered by alcohol and a bit too much confidence in his own observation skills. Turns out, sometimes you do not need anyone to report you. You do it perfectly on your own. And speaking of unbelievable situations, it is about to get even worse. Story 4. The Marathon Winner by Subway. What is the fastest way to win a marathon? Hard training, iron discipline, or just not running at all? One woman chose option 3. During the Boston Marathon, she appeared at the finish line with an incredible time. The problem? No one remembered seeing her on the course. No sweat, no exhaustion. She looked fresher than the spectators. Turns out for most of the race, she was not running. She took the subway, jumped out near the finish line, and suddenly appeared like a miracle athlete to claim victory. While others collapsed from exhaustion, she was the only one who looked completely fine. And that is exactly what exposed her. The title was taken away. Her reputation disappeared faster than the train she rode. Turns out cheating can get you to the finish line faster, but the truth always arrives right after. And sometimes, the cost is much higher. Story 5. The president who died, trying too hard to prove he was strong. He only wanted to prove one very simple thing: that he was not weak, not old, not tired, and definitely not someone who needed a coat. On Inauguration Day in freezing rain and brutal cold, he refused a coat, refused a hat, refused gloves. And just to really prove his point, he launched into a speech that lasted nearly 2 hours, so long that if it were a YouTube video, most people would have clicked away halfway through. The crowd stood in the rain, shivering like human phone vibrations, and he kept going, talking like the weather itself was supposed to respect his determination. A few days later, he came down with pneumonia. A month later, he was dead, becoming the president with the shortest term in history. He did prove he was tough, just not tougher than the cold. Turns out, sometimes ego does not just make you look foolish, it ends everything very quickly. And sometimes, you do not even need to die to completely fail. Story 6. The touchdown in the wrong end zone. He ran like a hero. Ball in hand, no one could stop him. The crowd started roaring, and in his head there was probably only one thought: this is my moment. He had just picked up the ball from a fumble and sprinted at full speed. Everything looked like a perfect highlight. He was about to score. He was about to become the hero of the game. The camera was probably zooming in already. There was just one small, very small detail. He was running toward the end zone of his own team. The crowd got louder, but not from excitement. His teammates panicked. The opponents just stood there like they were watching a live comedy show. And then he completed the perfect touchdown for the other team. In a few seconds, he went from hero to a walking meme. Turns out in sports, you do not just need speed, you also need direction. But at least, he still knew where he was. Story 7. The thief who called the police to find the car he stole. He lost his car and panicked. Not the "maybe I parked wrong" kind of panic, real panic. The kind that makes you do what any responsible citizen would do. Call the police. He reported everything in detail. The car, the license plate, the last place he saw it. His voice was full of worry, almost on the edge of tears. You would think this was just a poor victim asking for help. There was just one small problem. The car he had lost was the one he stole a few hours earlier. Police did not need much time. They quickly noticed something was off and tracked him down. Result: the caller and the suspect were the same person. Probably one of the rare cases where the criminal hands over all the information to the authorities. Crime and customer service combined into one phone call. And speaking of making an impression, someone else managed to do it in an even more unforgettable way. Story 8. Stealing a plane to impress an ex. Flowers and chocolate were too boring, at least for him. When he wanted to impress his ex, he chose a method no one could really compete with. He stole a Boeing. With only limited flying experience, he climbed into the cockpit, started the aircraft, and took off like he was in a low-budget action movie. Then he flew around for hours with one clear goal to prove he was not ordinary. Down on the ground, nothing felt romantic at all. Authorities were in full panic, trying to figure out what was even happening. Eventually, he landed safely. And as expected, the first people waiting for him were not his ex. It was the police. No one knows if that performance won anyone back, but it definitely made sure he was not going anywhere for a while. And if you think that was reckless, just wait for what comes next. Story 9. The psychic and the spoon that refused to bend. He could bend spoons with his mind, unless someone actually checked. With full confidence and a mysterious look, he went on television claiming he had special powers. Bending spoons, shaping metal, reading thoughts. It sounded like science fiction, except he was completely serious. Everything went smoothly, until the show decided not to use his props. Instead, they gave him normal spoons, fully controlled. No tricks, no preparation, just him and his abilities. And then something incredible happened. Nothing happened. He struggled, blamed the lights, the pressure, the wrong energy, but the spoon stayed straight, just like the logic he was missing. When powers meet real testing, the truth shows up very quickly, and some people believe in things even bigger than that. Story 10. The man who built a rocket to prove the Earth is flat. He had one very strong belief: the Earth is flat. And instead of reading books or looking at scientific evidence, he chose what he thought was the most convincing method: build a rocket. In his backyard, he assembled a steam-powered rocket with one clear goal: fly high enough to see the truth for himself. No NASA, no scientists, just him and his belief. After several dangerous test attempts, he finally launched. That moment must have felt incredible, at least for the first few seconds. Then everything went wrong. The rocket malfunctioned, lost control, and he crashed back to the ground with a tragic ending. Physics, phase 1. Belief 0. Turns out you can argue with people, but you cannot argue with physics. And sometimes, people in power hold beliefs just as dangerous. Story 11. The fear that Guam might tip over. A politician had a very serious concern: what if an island flipped over? During an official hearing in front of military leaders and experts, he asked this question with complete seriousness. He worried that moving thousands of troops and their families to Guam might make the island too heavy and cause it to tip to one side. No one laughed, at least not out loud. The room fell into that awkward silence where everyone wonders, do we explain this or pretend we did not hear it? Eventually, an admiral responded, calmly explaining that the island is attached to the ocean floor and cannot tip over like a boat. Science once again had to reintroduce itself. And in business, bad decisions can become even more expensive. Story 12. The band with no future. A young band walked into an audition hoping to change their lives. They played with full energy eyes, saying, "We're about to make it." The atmosphere felt like you could almost smell the dream. Then they got rejected. The reason a record executive confidently said that guitar music was outdated and bands like this would soon disappear. A statement that sounds smart if you have never heard music after 1960. That band was the Beatles. While the label chose another group, one no one remembers today, the Beatles signed elsewhere and quickly became the biggest band in music history. Not just famous, they changed how the world hears music. Sometimes you do not have to be wrong. It is enough that the person judging you is. History looked back and simply said nope, and some decisions cost even more, the kind you never want to remember. Story 13. The man who walked around the world backwards. Traveling around the world is already difficult, but one man decided to do it in the exact opposite way, walking backwards. Not a few steps for fun, not a TikTok challenge, but an 18-month journey across multiple countries just to prove that he could do it. The reason no one really knows, maybe not even him, he wore special glasses to see behind him, taking slow, careful steps with a level of commitment that was both impressive and deeply confusing. People saw him like some kind of phenomenon, half admiration, half confusion. In the end, he completed the journey. Technically, yes, it is an achievement, but it also raises a very real question. If you spend nearly 2 years doing something no one asked for, is it success or just determination pointed in the wrong direction? Achievement. Technically, yes, but not everyone gets that kind of ending. Story 14. The $1 Million Hotel. With no insurance, a luxury hotel had just been completed. Elegant interiors, prime location, everything was ready for a grand opening. The owner looked at it and thought, perfect. There was just one small detail. No insurance. Why to save money? After spending so much on construction, he decided insurance was unnecessary. It sounds smart if you ignore every possible risk. Then right before opening day, the one thing no one wants happened. A fire. Not a small one. Not minor damage. The entire building burned to the ground within hours. No insurance, no compensation, no backup plan. Just ashes and a very expensive lesson. Turns out cutting costs in the wrong place can cost you everything. Saving money in the worst possible way. And in politics, some mistakes are even harder to understand. Story 15. When a politician challenged the wrong people. He was a rising candidate, confident, polished, and already surrounded by a few uncomfortable rumors. When reporters confronted him directly, instead of avoiding the question, he chose to fight back. With full confidence, he challenged them to follow him. Basically, go ahead, follow me. You'll get bored. Sounds like a movie line. The problem is, this was not a movie. And the press heard that and said, oh, we'd be happy to. A few days later, they had everything: photos, timestamps, locations, and a woman who was definitely not his wife. All documented so clearly, it looked like they were filming an investigative series. His political career almost collapsed overnight. Turns out challenging people whose entire job is finding the truth is not a great strategy. Never challenge journalists, and some sentences only need to be said once to end everything. Story 16. One sentence. Enough to end a career. One sentence can change everything. And in this case, it did in the worst possible way. During an interview, he tried to explain his view on a sensitive issue. He sounded like he wanted to be logical, informed, even scientific. And then, he said something that made the entire country pause. He claimed that in certain cases, the female body could shut down pregnancy. A statement that was wrong scientifically, and wrong in every other way. The reaction was immediate. Experts, doctors, and basically anyone who passed basic biology pushed back instantly. Within seconds, his career started collapsing. Turns out you can argue about many things, but you cannot invent biology on the spot. Biology disagreed, and some people believe things even harder to defend than that. Story 17. One recording, enough to end everything. A powerful man, rich, influential, owner of an NBA team. He had been at the top for so long it probably felt like he could never fall. Then a recording surfaced. In it, he said things that should never have been said, especially in a world where everything can be recorded. Words that were offensive, divisive, and impossible to defend. At first, he may have thought it was just a private conversation, but private and internet rarely go together. The recording leaked. Public reaction exploded. The league had no choice. He was banned for life from the NBA and forced to sell the team, all from one conversation. Everything collapsed in an instant. One conversation, game over. And in this era, technology does not just capture moments, it exposes mistakes at full speed. Story 18. The world-changing invention? That turned out to be a scooter. This will change the world. At least that is what people said about a secret project hyped as the biggest breakthrough since the personal computer. Celebrities, tech experts, everyone was waiting. People imagined something that could fly, or at least something revolutionary. Then the product was revealed. A two-wheeled self-balancing scooter. Not flying, not groundbreaking in the way people expected. Just something that looked like you were standing on a gadget from an electronics store. People looked at each other like, wait, that's it. Expectations, a tech revolution. Reality, mall security transport. Expectations versus reality. Turns out hype can fly very high, even when the product cannot. And the irony of this story is not even over yet. Story 19. The owner of Segway Namaste had an accident on a Segway. The owner of Segway had an accident on a Segway. It sounds like a joke, but it is an absurdly real one. After all the hype, the debate, and the skeptical looks, this self-balancing machine still existed, and some people trusted it enough to use it every day. One of those people was the owner himself. During a routine ride near a cliff, he was using the Segway normally. No stunt, no big risk. Just a trip that should have been simple. Then one small moment happened. Loss of control, a slip, and he went over the edge. The accident happened so fast that people barely had time to process what had happened. A machine promoted as safe and easy to use ended up causing a deeply ironic ending. You can't write this. Sometimes irony stops being funny and turns very dark. And some people make you wonder what could possibly happen next. Story 20. A genius brain in a jar. He kept Einstein's brain in a jar. It sounds like the start of a horror movie, but it actually happened. After Albert Einstein died, a doctor performing the autopsy decided to do something no one asked for. He removed Einstein's brain and kept it. No family permission, no clear plan. Just an idea like, maybe I'll discover the secret of genius. And then, he kept it for over 40 years. Carried it around, stored in jars, occasionally sending pieces to researchers. But he was not a leading expert, and in the end, no great discovery came from it. No secrets unlocked, no breakthrough achieved. Just a brilliant brain, and a very strange decision. Curiosity gone wrong, and when money enters the story, things can get even worse. Story 21. When trying to control the market, backfires. Controlling the market sounds like a genius plan, or the plot of a financial movie. And in this case, they truly believed they could do it. Two billionaire brothers decided to buy as much silver as possible. Not just investing, they tried to take over almost the entire market with one simple goal: push the price up and become the silver kings of the world. For a while it worked. Prices skyrocketed. They got richer and richer. Everything looked like a perfect win. Until the market reacted. Regulations changed, prices started to fall, and when they fell fast. In a short time, billions disappeared. From the peak of power, they crashed into one of the most famous financial collapses in history. Turns out, you can try to control many things, but not the market. Greed lost, and some people fail in completely different ways. Story 22. The entrepreneur who was wrong, but still won. Wrong again and again, yet still rich. It sounds like a system glitch, but for him it was a lifestyle. He made one bad decision after another. Shipping goods to places that did not need them. Investing in ideas that made everyone shake their heads. If you were around him, you would probably think, okay, this guy is going bankrupt. But no, somehow, everything worked. The goods arrived exactly when demand appeared. The market shifted in his favor out of nowhere. Decisions that looked stupid turned into profit. While others calculated every step, he just kept being wrong in his own way and still won. Not because he was brilliant, not because of strategy, just illogical luck. Universe glitch. Sometimes you do not understand what is happening, because even the universe does not either. And sometimes even science cannot explain cases like this. Story 23. The Wellness Doctor and a Therapy No One Asked For. A doctor became famous for his health treatments, but in a way that makes you wonder, why would anyone do this? He believed many human problems, especially undesirable urges, came from diet. And his solution? An extremely strict lifestyle, combined with treatments you definitely would not find in a normal clinic. The most notable one, yogurt therapy. Not eating, not drinking, but in a way you probably do not want details about. It sounds scientific because it includes the word yogurt. In reality, even wealthy patients at the time were left wondering what exactly they just paid for. And yet he still attracted followers and built an entire health trend. Wellness gone wild. And some people believe in things even harder to understand than this. Story 24. From a car dream us to a cocaine deal. From cars to cocaine. Sounds like a career turn no one would expect, but for him it was a rescue plan. He was once a talented engineer behind iconic car designs. He built his own company with the ambition to change the industry. But money ran out. Projects drained resources, pressure started closing in. And then, he came up with a solution. Instead of finding investors or cutting costs, he agreed to take part in a large cocaine deal, believing the money would save the company. It sounded like a bad idea, and it was. The FBI had been watching the entire time and arrested him during the deal. In one moment, he went from ambitious entrepreneur to headline news for all the wrong reasons. Career destroyed, and when belief is placed in the wrong place, the consequences rarely stop at just one person. Story 25. The Hollow Earth Cult. The Earth is hollow, and people believed it. Not casually like that's interesting, but strongly enough to turn it into a full ideology. One man claimed that we are not living on the surface of the Earth, but inside it. The sun, the moon, the stars all contained within a giant sphere. It sounds like a joke, but it was not. He attracted thousands of followers, built a community, even formed a kind of cult around this belief. They lived together, researched, and tried to prove something science had already dismissed long ago. Every time an experiment failed, they did not change the belief, they changed the explanation. At that point, science probably just stopped responding. Science left the chat. And when blind belief meets power and money, scandals are usually not far behind. Story 26. When a moral icon collapses. A symbol of morality falling apart. He was the leader of a major religious organization known for preaching family values, discipline, and the right way to live. For many people, he was the example of how to live correctly. Then a photo surfaced. Then more information. And then a personal scandal exploded involving behavior that completely contradicted everything he had preached. Strange details, hard to believe, and the deeper people looked, the harder it became to explain. The public was not just shocked by what happened, but by the clear gap between words and actions. An image built over years, collapsed in days. No explanation was strong enough. No way to recover what was lost. Hypocrisy exposed. Turns out what disappoints people most is not the mistake, it is the contradiction. And sometimes, words can destroy more than you think. Story 27. When a lie comes with a $1.5 billion bill. Lying, and paying $1.5 billion for it. It sounds like something from a sci-fi script, but this is real life. He built his career on shocking conspiracy theories. Huge platform, massive audience. Every time he spoke, millions listened. The problem is, this time he went too far. He spread false claims about a tragic event, causing victims and their families to be harassed for years. At that point, it was no longer just an opinion, it had real consequences. Then the court stepped in. After the trial, he was ordered to pay nearly $1.5 billion, a number big enough to make anyone pause and rethink everything they have ever said. Turns out free speech does not mean free from consequences. Freedom consequence-free. And some things, when abused, come back very fast. Story 28. Bridges. Designed to exclude. Low bridges, built to keep people out. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but in this case, it was intentional design. A powerful urban planner created roadways to the beach. On the surface, it looked like public access for everyone. But he added one small detail. The bridges were built lower than usual. Not for engineering reasons, but for a very specific purpose. Buses could not pass through. And at that time, buses were the main transportation for lower-income communities and minorities. The result? People without cars were effectively blocked from reaching those public beaches. No signs, no explicit law, just design. Concrete discrimination. Turns out, you do not always need to say exclusion out loud. You can build it into the system. And in war, bad decisions can have consequences on a much larger scale. Story 29. The general who had everything except courage. A powerful army, but no attack. It sounds like a paradox, but it really happened. He was a general exceptional at organizing training and building forces. Under his command, the army became one of the best at that time. Everything was ready. Except the decision to strike. Every time an opportunity appeared, he delayed. There was always a reason. The enemy was too strong. More time was needed, more troops required. But in reality, he misjudged the situation and missed opportunity after opportunity. While he hesitated, the enemy grew stronger. A perfect army, held back by the hesitation of its own leader. Fear strategy. Turns out you can have every resource, but without decisiveness, it all becomes meaningless. And sometimes, the biggest mistake is not acting wrong, it is not acting at all. Story 30. When war is solved with numbers. Winning a war with data. It sounds smart, logical, scientific, almost modern. One official believed that if you could measure everything, numbers, ratios, outcomes, you could control and win a complex war. He turned war into a math problem. Better numbers meant closer to victory. The problem is, numbers do not reflect reality. Reports were polished, data was misinterpreted, and human factors, willpower, culture, morale were completely ignored. On paper, everything looked fine. On the ground, everything was falling apart. The gap between data and truth kept growing until it could not be hidden anymore. Numbers lied. Turns out you can manage a company with spreadsheets, but war is not a spreadsheet. And in the end, this story leads to one of the most memorable falls. Story 31. The stunt that made history for the wrong reason. The biggest stunt and the biggest failure. He was a legendary daredevil, used to flying over cars, over gaps, even challenging death itself. So when he announced he would jump across a massive canyon using a rocket, the world watched. It sounded insane, but for him it was the peak of his career. The rocket was ready. Everything was set. The crowd held their breath. The countdown ended, and he launched. Then the one thing no one wanted happened. The parachute deployed too early. Instead of flying across the canyon, he was pulled off course, floating down slowly in a very public, very awkward descent. No legendary flight, just a failure broadcast to millions. Epic fail. Turns out sometimes it is not about courage. It is that your plan refuses to cooperate. And even then, that is still not the end of the story. After all this, the question is no longer who is the dumbest. The real question is, how did any of this actually happen? You just watched a journey where logic was left behind and confidence took the wheel straight into disaster. Now it is your turn. Which story made you go, wait, this cannot be real? Drop it in the comments. But do not pick the funniest one. Pick the one that made you slightly concerned for humanity. If you just lost a little more faith in people, welcome to the club. Hit like if you feel the same. And do not forget to subscribe, because trust me, there are still plenty of stories out there that will make you ask, why?